ואלה המשפטים אשר תוסם לפניהם. Chazal say, what does it mean, tosim lifneim? That the Torah needs to be given over with a proper preparation. You should present to them, the Lashon is keshulchan aruch, like a prepared table. Meaning, don't give over divrei Torah in a way where you say, there's the kitchen, there's food in the freezer, in the fridge, go figure it out. But Moshe Rabbeinu was tasked with presenting divrei Torah in a way that's completely ready to consume, like a gourmet meal, that when they eat, when they receive the information, they feel the taste, they feel why it's good. They get relief from understanding that this is the nature of reality. It's ironic that today the Shulchan Aruch is a dry collection of all the information without any reasoning. And here the Lashon Shulchan Aruch is being used in Chazal to mean with the reasoning, with the taste, with all the deeper secrets, so that it goes in well. So that's what a Shulchan Aruch means, a prepared table, a table that's prepared to eat, meaning that a human being that starts eating those foods, those fruits, those products, right away receives sustenance from it. That's the opposite of giving them raw materials, where if they were to eat the materials raw, then it wouldn't be edible. Yeah? And so in that sense, the pshat is raw food. The soid, the secret, is the Shulchan Aruch, is the prepared food, the food that's consumable for humans in order to give them sustenance, in order to give them more desire for life, in order to attach them to life. Because this is the purpose of the dibur in general. The dibur is a glue. The dibur is the koyach that brings all the other koyachas together. If we didn't have dibur, we wouldn't be able to connect spiritually the way that we do. We would be very limited in how much we can communicate. And so the dibur allows us to transmit, but specifically because there is an other. Dibur would be irrelevant if there was no other, even if that other is ourselves. And so dibur is a form of glue. Torah is the ultimate dibur. Nevuah, prophecy, means that the soul that speaks woke up and is now in charge of the being. That's all prophecy means. Prophecy means to be a human being the way that a human being was intended to be. Unfortunately, that hasn't been happening. The Koch HaDibur has been overwhelmed by the imagination that's been seeing so many tragedies, so much suffering, so much madness. The imagination has forgotten what is possible. The imagination doesn't no longer know how to draw an image, a life, an experience that is properly worth pursuing, so that we can have the energy to pursue it, so that we can make reality happen the way that it was supposed to. So when the imagination gets contaminated because of difficult events, the dibur now has to compete with much more excitement. It's much less likely that the dibur is going to be able to take charge of that being once the imagination has been instigated and it's afraid. And so therefore, ve'ela mishpatim asher tosim lifneihem, these are the mishpatim. You have to give it to them in a way where they're going to be able to digest this dibur, where it's going to attach them to what we're trying to attach them to, which is the source of life, which is the collective force that made us. We want to know the ways, the laws, the processes of reality, but we want to know it in a way that we learn to love it. If we don't love it, then knowing it is no longer a service. Knowing it becomes a problem. And for this we see many times in Chazal where it says, Mutav sheyir shagagen. If we know people are not going to know what to do with the right information, don't give them the right information, because if they know they're not supposed to do it and they still do it, they're causing a bigger scar on their soul. Let them do it without knowing. The scar is much smaller, much less of a problem. Don't wake up the midas hadin, don't wake up judgment in a place where judgment is not going to solve the problem. Judgment is here to solve problems. If there's a place where if we create the right fear, if we create the right realization, it will result in better action, then we have the right to use it under specific circumstances. But if there is no purpose, if there is no relief, then there is no use for judgment. And the dibur is the one that's going to decide. And so when we speak about mishpatim, we're speaking primarily about human interaction. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, throughout Tanakh, if we look for what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu love more than anything else? If we see people today, if we ask, most people seem to assume that what he's looking for most is discipline. But if we look in Tanakh, he says specifically otherwise. All discipline is to serve another purpose. What impresses him most, what he's always looking for, is two words: mishpat and tzedakah. This is what he loves most. Mishpat and tzedakah. Throughout. All the Nevi'im. If people are doing korbanos, people are doing holidays, chagim, people are coming to the Beis HaMikdash, people are davening, he's not impressed. If they don't do mishpat and tzedakah, he goes at them with the same or even more wrath than he goes after the rest of them. And who does he help? Where does he get involved and do miracles? Where there's mishpat with tzedakah. So what is mishpat? Mishpat is a word that we don't have in our vocabulary. It doesn't have a translation. Just like all the ancient words, they don't have translations because they are relating to an actual force within nature. They're talking about something real. It's not a concept. We have words for concepts. They didn't have words for concepts. They had words for reality. They named reality. They named something that they understood and knew. And these forces are running reality. Reality is being run by mishpat. Mishpat is bigger than us. Mishpat is running us from the inside and from the outside. Why are we the way that we are? Because Mishpat said so. Who is Mishpat? And so Mishpat comes from a combination of two different intelligences. Mishpat is where the attributes, after we have defined every attribute and we know how to run each attribute inside of us, are being run by the seichel, by the intelligence. when the attributes are being run by the intelligence and the intelligence decides which attribute to use at which time, this is called mishpat. So if I'm a nice person and every person that comes to me, I give the same amount of tzedakah, that's not mishpat. That's chesed. I'm not using intelligence. I'm just using an attribute. But if I give this guy this much and the other guy the other, and I listen to every story and my heart is involved each time, that's mishpat. Because I'm allowing this person to warm up my attribute of kindness and compassion, and this person is getting my judgment. This person is getting more open, and this person is getting less open. Who's deciding? The intelligence is deciding. This is mishpat. A combination of sechel and midos. When the sechel is involved in the midos, that's called mishpat. When the midos are running out of control, when the wrong people are getting your midos, when you're angry at one person and then the person you love gets your anger, that's not mishpat. That's violating mishpat. That makes the Creator extremely upset. Because nobody can live in such a world. That world is never going to make any sense. I'm your best friend. I've done only good to you. Now you come and you give me all this because somebody else made you upset? Something is not working. That's not mishpat. That's going to break the world. This is why on Rosh Hashanah, when we're trying to wake people up so that they return to the balance that the world requires, we call HaKadosh Baruch Hu HaMelech HaMishpat. He's the one that knows if we gave the right people what they deserved, or we're mixing and matching freely based on how it feels right for us. So mishpat is about interactions, but it's a specific way of interacting. This world needs us to be tough. This world needs us to be kind. This world needs us to know compassion. But this world needs us to know when to use which one. With whom to use which one. If we can't learn this, the world cannot stand. And so then mishpat is knowing when to use which midah. Tzedakah. Tzedakah. The source of the word, the root of the word, is tzedek. Justice. Justice is not the right word for tzedek. Tzedek is called the 10th sphera, Malchut, is called tzedek. Tzedek means whatever comes out as a result of mishpat. If when we do the mishpat, then the people behave in accordance with the mishpat, that's tzedek. Then the people who behave accordingly are called tzaddikim. The tzaddik creates tzedek by doing tzedakah. Tzedakah means recognizing your place in this world. You are a channel. If you allow your channel to deliver the goods, you're giving tzedakah. If anywhere in your channel is blocked, if for whatever reason the attributes or the intelligence are not producing, and therefore what's coming forth is not appropriate, there is no tzedakah. That violates tzedek. When someone gives to another person money, they're doing tzedakah. They're being a channel. This is the nature of who we are. This is tzedek. This is the appropriate justice. The appropriate justice, if we might call it such, although tzedek means something much deeper, is that we allow our desire to give to fulfill itself. That's justice. If we don't have where to fulfill our desire to give, there's no justice. Mishpat u'tzedakah. Mishpat u'tzedakah is not conceptual. It's not something that they teach us in order to keep us in line. It's what created us. Mishpat has been judging us from the moment we became conscious, and has been guiding us. Whether it's been accurate or not is a whole different story. If Mishpat has been successful with us is a different story, but Mishpat has certainly been working on us. This is the nature of what's within. This is the nature of what's driving. And so, Ela mishpatim asher tosim lifneim, when you teach them the mishpatim, when you teach them mishpat, when you teach them the right and the wrong, tosim lifneim, you have to make it sweet for them. They have to love it. They have to realize why it's important for them. It's not enough it's important for everybody else. Because then it will go into them. It will become one with them. It will live inside of their biology. If it's given over wrong, it will not only not live inside of their biology, but it will even try to kill the host. So how the information is consumed is what's going to result in the process of how the information is going to be digested. And so then the first mishpat, the first thing that comes is kisikne eved. You'll buy your friend as a servant. Some people look at this and say, the Torah is outdated. This doesn't apply. Nobody thinks like that anymore. And yet, I personally have seen slaves upon slaves, slaving away not for even ideals, in a very simple way, for someone who is giving them a paycheck, or for someone who happens to have emotional power over them. And so this reality is still very much our reality. We're not free. We're not free, and some of us are serving their friends, their family, people they know. And this happens because, how does it happen that a person becomes sold into slavery? It's because he has no money and he stole. And therefore he needs to come up with money, and he doesn't have how to come up with money. So now he's going to give service instead of money. Money in the spiritual world is zechuyos. How can you even say zechuyos in English? Merits. Nothing compares. The languages are so different. So, if you have merit, you don't have spiritual fear. If you're out of merits, then you're spiritually on the bottom. Someone's keeping track. HaMelech HaMishpat, the one who designed Mishpat, he's keeping track. Where are you? You're on top, you're on the bottom. And so Zchuyos is money in the world of spirit. Merits. Merits are created by intention. If I do something very difficult and my intention is to help someone, I gain merits. I do something very difficult and my intention is to boast about it, I don't gain merits. And so, when we have enough merit, then spiritually we feel protected. What are we protected from when we have merits? We're protected from having to doubt our relationship with the Creator. When we have enough merits, we don't doubt the relationship. When we don't doubt the relationship, we're not vulnerable. No one can touch us. When we lose merits, we open up to all kinds of hallucinations. We open up to all kinds of potentials. We open up to all kinds of possibilities. And then, when we don't have any merits, we offend reality based on our own interpretation. Now we're in deficit. We don't have merits, and we've become a burden. What's happened? Relationship with the Creator not looking too good. Now, we're going to be on the marketplace. If someone is looking for a servant, we have someone here who thinks they're supposed to serve. So now all that's required is that a relationship is formed and the service begins. And so as much as humanity has moved forward in the sense that externally we are ashamed of certain behaviors and we have realized that it's not appropriate, spiritually, the spirits of our ancestors are still very much alive in us and very, very active. Because they were much more alive than us. They were engraving much deeper than us in the collective soul. Life meant much more to them, and therefore they were in it. And they had the capacity to be in it. They had the nerves to support the lifestyle. And so, if they had slavery physically, we have slavery spiritually. If they had people killing each other physically, we have people killing each other spiritually. If they had nations constantly going to war and trying to undermine other nations spiritually, physically, we have it going on spiritually. And so everything that they had is still spiritually true, even if physically the behaviors have changed. The spirit is still not healed from the wounds that it took on early on. And we're still living. We're living those interpretations because there was no one that went in deep enough to give us a new one. They were deep, and their interpretations are much more influential to our own lives than the interpretations that we have today. The interpretations today are relating to a very shallow part of life. They're not really touching the core where those people lived. And so the mishpat that's being taught with the Eved Ivri, with the servant, is that this process of enslaving a human being is by nature temporary. It can never be anything other than temporary. And there are different levels. There are different levels of enslavement. There are different levels of how damaged is the relationship between the being and itself, and why is it allowing itself to be used for a purpose other than what it was created for. And so if there is still a vibrant life force beneath whatever it is that caused the damage, then Shemitah, every 6 years, he goes out. If the damage is deeper, then every Yovel, every 50 years, he goes out. And this relates to cycles that are still very much active, that are still playing with our minds at all times. These cycles, these processes, whether they are in years or in a different quantity of time, things are happening to us constantly that are affecting us. And we simply don't have the language to identify, and therefore we assume that it's random. But the one who's making it has a very specific language to identify, and things are happening perfectly. Things are moving exactly as directed. And part of those directions are coming from us, and that's the scary part. The reassuring part is that every reaction to what we're doing has already been pre-designed. So we can't really get it too wrong. But we can go pretty wrong, I think, I'd say, based simply on history, based on how much bloodshed has already been our inheritance, and yet people haven't really woken up. They haven't really realized that something is extremely wrong. They have little explanations of, oh, it was this guy, it was that guy, it was this event, it was that event. But there isn't a realization that something really, really deep has to change. Something is really, really off with how we see reality and how we interpret who we are and what we're supposed to be doing here. And this losing track of reality, losing track of what it means to be us, losing track of how to maintain the quality of life, not the physical quality, the spiritual quality. All this is a result of the people not living by mishpat. This is why the Nevi'im were screaming. If you will violate mishpat, the world will deteriorate. Human minds will be extremely confused and they will not know what they're supposed to be doing. Because when we learn based on reward and punishment, we learn based on what feels good and what doesn't feel good. And so if there's no mishpat, then good behavior doesn't feel different than bad behavior. There's no distinction, there's no way of knowing, there's no way of getting the proper feedback from the world. If the world is not giving us the proper feedback, then it's only a matter of time until we're all extremely frustrated. And so all this deterioration, all this distance, the prophets were naming it right from the beginning. You guys are losing mishpat. You guys are going to have a horrible experience. You can't build a world like this. And this is why Kadosh Baruch Hu is called Melech Oyev Tzedakah Mishpat. This is what he loves. How do we know this is what he loves? Because this is how he created. He created so that without it, it can't work. So what do we think? Does he love it or does he hate it? If he made it mandatory, it's because he loves it and he wants it. He didn't give us any other choice. If we're going to live by Mishpat, then we're going to find our way. If we're going to violate Mishpat, then there isn't going to be a way. Because this is the nature of our production. The nature of our production is attributes. The attributes are moving us to create. And so if we don't know how to use our attributes appropriately, the world just falls apart. The world just, it can't work. We can't give each other what we need, and we're all going to feel the results. And so this is the first step after Matan Torah. Now we've become a collective, now that we're united and we're going to create our own path. Now, ve'ela mishpatim asher tasim lifneim, they need to know some things. They need to understand how things work. They need to understand where to focus. So may we learn to understand better. May we get closer to knowing the real Mishpat. It's very sensitive. It's very subtle. It's buried deep inside of us. There's no other place to find it. When we are really, really trying to know, then something inside of us knows. The more we already have decided what we want, the less we can listen to what we really want. And so we should be able to find the right balance. We should be able to find this mishpat. We should be able to please the One, and He should come dwell in us. May it happen soon.